And welcome to Lone Star Yell Fight, where your favorite Aggie, Andy Tom Chesson, and your favorite Longhorn, James Christopher, take you deep inside the two flagship programs of Texas football. And good morning, everybody. Today is Lone Star Yell Fight, where we have our favorite Aggie, Andy Tom Chesson, hopefully your favorite Longhorn, James Christopher. And I'd like to point out a couple of things. First of all, Andy went to actual Texas A&M, not Texas A&M at Target, and I certainly did not go to the University of Texas at Walmart. We would like to make that distinction because things are getting ugly. Andy, you're in Sin City. How are you?
The University of Texas at Walmart has changed their name to Texas State. They did that a few years ago. You should get that right.
And now we just lost all of our San Marcos fans, both of them. Everything going good in the Vegas? You're still out there?
I'm done. Vegas is always one of these propositions where, 2 days is good, 3 days is too much, but I've been here for 6. So,
Oh my God. At least you're getting good oxygen.
yeah, if you leave the casino, if you're in the casino, they filter the air. And that's this combination of pumping a lot of oxygen in to quiet the thoughts in your brain that say go outside, but also everybody still chain smokes or vapes or does something else inside the casino, and they're trying to suck all that up. So I have itchy eyes, which is a thing I didn't know you could have at, you know, but evidently once you hit 50, look what you have to look forward to.
I'm,
Things just start itching randomly.
I'm so excited. At least both of us still have our hair.
Yes.
There's that. Hey,
Hello,
so
hello.
A&M had a frustrating loss. Um,
Frustrating loss, frustrating season, frustrating three
yeah.
years. How do you want to go with this?
Well, what I want to talk like they're in the game literally the whole game, and there were many opportunities they could have literally taken over and maybe beaten, maybe won it by 14 points. Is that like somehow worse, or do you find something that they can build off of?
Well, I mean, fun with numbers. Jimbo has won 10 games. He's just taken 2 seasons to do it, which is probably not acceptable because his last 2 seasons so far, he's sitting at 10 and 11. Um, this season has been the story of the last couple of seasons. All of our losses are by one possession, except for the Miami game, which really got away towards the end of the game, but we were in that game at the beginning of the fourth quarter. You lose to Alabama at home by one possession. You lose to Tennessee the next week on the road by one possession. You lose to Ole Miss on the road because you can't kick a field goal because your deep snapper did something that made the field goal. I think our field goal kicker is waiting for Lane Kiffin to try to ice him, so he just, I don't need to bother to try to kick it. Which, the reverse not ice is probably more psychs the player out more than anything else. It's Aggie fans are somewhere on the spectrum between super angry and super resigned to our fate. And as the week's gone on, and depending on the outcome of this game, you will see a lot more of the anger if we lose, but moving towards the resignation of I don't know what the answer to fix this is. Um, it becomes a financial problem. All the things you would expect to be happening are happening as far as the fan base goes and the media goes about what's Jimbo's future and what's going to happen with this. And I think a lot of us are getting to the reality of no matter how much money a school has, you get into the conversation of not can you, but should you when it comes to eating this kind of contract.
Right.
Uh, I don't want to bore you with numbers, but the conversation is we still owe him $77 million for I think 8 more years. Um, Maybe it's 7. I don't remember. Probably 7. To get rid of him right now, you'd have to come up with 25% of that, and you pay out the rest over the life of the contract. So it's $19.25 million. Some just rounding up. That in itself isn't that big a deal. You got to pay off Durkin and Petrino, so that's probably about $4 to $5 million. I don't have their exact contract numbers. You've got to buy out the rest of the staff, so that's probably another $5 million. But then the big rub is if you want a coach that's going to be a splash name, like say Dan Lanning, who I mentioned last week, and who seems to be the current flavor of the day, you've got to come up with his new salary. That's $9 million probably. Maybe you could get him for 8. I mean,
Yeah.
crazy talk, but it's in that neighborhood. His buyout's $20 million, and any coach that's worth that's going to be a splash name is going to have a similar type buyout. Then you've got to pay for that new staff, which is $9 to $10 million. So the immediate within the next 12-month number is $66 million.
Yeah.
And again, you get to this point that could A&M afford it? Yeah, probably. I think the cash could be come up with. And if A&M loses this week against Mississippi State at home, which is a possibility, and we'll talk about that when we start talking about next week's games or this week's games, I think the next hire is not going to be a Dan Lanning. You're not going to go after a name coach. You're not going to go after a coach most media members have heard of. You're going to go after an up-and-coming offensive coordinator or defensive coordinator, because that's the only way you can afford to make this move, because all those numbers I just said, you're still paying Jimbo almost $8 million a year, seven and change for the next 8 years on top of whatever you're doing with the program going forward. You're paying him that to go away. That money is sunk cost. I do understand that accounting concept, but at some point you can't be paying. Let's say we hire a coach and in 2 years he's doing great. You want to get him up to a big number to make him think about not ever going away. Well, now you're talking about paying $16 to $17 million for head coaching positions.
Yeah.
For football.
And even if it's,
I don't think any of college football's there yet.
And not only that, but even if you are there, the optics are just awful. Like,
sure.
One of the things I was curious
because we made fun of your school for paying Tom Herman and Mac Brown for a really long time.
Yeah, well, yeah, and when I wanted to go to that, I'm glad you brought up Tom Herman, which is rare for me to say ever. You know, I remember going back to the Tom Herman hire. Texas almost felt pushed into it because of LSU's flirting, and I wonder if a decision was made quicker. Do you feel like at the time did Jimbo always feel like a fit to you, or even when Jimbo was hired, however long ago was there a part of you that was like, I don't know if this is going to work?
Anybody who tells you that hiring Jimbo from Florida State 6 years ago was met with any kind of skepticism outside of the Florida State media and certain members of the national media who just could not believe that you would take a coach from Florida State. Why would you make that move? No A&M fan was sad about Jimbo being our head coach. And for the first 3 years, especially in that COVID season of going 9-1 and winning the Orange Bowl, everybody was on board. That's when the mistake was made, because at that point, he was still under contract for 7 years.
Yeah.
A rumor started floating that LSU was looking for a head coach. Scott Woodward had just left the AD position at A&M for LSU. Woodward and Fisher are friends. People started getting really panicky about, well, Jimbo's going to leave. He's going to leave to LSU, and we're going to be stuck again. No head football coach has willingly left Texas A&M since Bear Bryant.
I was going to say, like, I don't.
It's not. Regardless of the smack talk that our fan bases want to give each other, this is not a stepping stone job. I
never saw it as that. So that to me,
but it hasn't
shocking.
been in decades. So the fear got into our heads a little bit. You don't want to lose. You don't want to lose to somebody who you've got a rivalry with, whatever. And so we doubled down on a contract we didn't have to double down on. So we played ourselves. And if you want to say LSU screwed both our institutions in this way around that same time, you're not probably too far off. But we got big donors who got big egos and weren't going to stand for even the potential of losing it. So they squashed it, which is their right to do. It's their money. The problem is, since that date, nothing has gone right. And you can blame injuries. But injuries, the injury excuse to me only goes so far, because if you're talking about the big injuries, you're talking about losing a quarterback for a significant amount of time. Jimbo's offensive have a history of doing that, going back to right after Jameis Winston graduated, left Florida State. Sorry, but I don't know the other word. Just left.
He majored in seafood, from what I understand.
He stopped by Publix, got some crab legs, and headed to the NFL. Which you need protein for that combine, I hear. But it's just we're all there. Regardless of what's going to happen this weekend, it's just kind of the realities hitting us in the face. I don't necessarily think an up and coming coordinator is a bad move, but it's just you've got a higher risk profile from a guy who hasn't run a program. And running the University of Texas, running Texas A&M, running Ohio State, those aren't running Texas State, like I mentioned earlier. It's not running Baylor. This is not a you're just the head coach of a football program. You are everything on that campus. And there are some schools who have handled this transition better to what being the head coach looks like now in 2023. A&M, I think, is behind the gun in a number of ways. They've structured the support for whoever that head coach is going to be. And if there's any good to come out of having a guy that doesn't have the experience running a program, you might get to have some say over what that program is structured like. And we could talk about that all day because I think it's different than it used to be of just a guy who knew the X's and O's and could recruit well.
We saw that in Charlie Strong. Like if that had been only the job at Texas, I think Charlie Strong would have been had a much better career here.
Yep.
And I guess it's also the thing that would worry me for you guys. If it was a coordinator who didn't have a strong enough personality, then you could see them getting kind of pushed around by donors and boosters and whatnot.
Well, the names you would look at if you're going to go outside the program, because there's some talk about, well, just let Petrino run it, or let Durkin run it, or let our DL coach Robinson run it. If you go outside, you would want somebody who's been around the type of program you want to emulate. So then one of the names you're hearing is Glenn Schulman, who's the defensive coordinator at Georgia, has worked under Kirby, has worked under Saban. That's the kind of program that we want to be able to emulate from a structure standpoint. And Jimbo just doesn't play that game to this point.
Well, that does make sense in the sense that that's what the NFL does too, right? Like we talked about how many Bill Walsh disciples forever were there in the NFL. Yeah. It does make sense that that's what you do is you emulate the successful thing. Speaking of not emulating success, Andy, I know that you probably weren't watching, but I was messaging you, and my messages during the Longhorn game began with Quinn who, and ended up with, I have never seen a quarterback, had to have been something that was said to him or said to himself, get into his head and fall apart the way he did. And I don't think it was anything that K-State was doing. All of a sudden, he was behind people when he threw the ball. He was in front of them. He was bounce passing. I've never seen anything like it, to go from throwing darts to not hitting anything.
I think what, and this is guessing because I've only really seen the highlights because our games were running at the same great time slot last week. 11 o'clock in the morning. Very happy when that's not one of the prime spots with the new SEC contract next year. I think that is a guy who doesn't get a lot of reps, who doesn't have good control of their mechanics. And so you can do it for a while, but one thing adjusts or you get popped the right way. And so you're favoring something just a little bit and your mechanics get out of whack and you don't have the body of work to go back or even the muscle memory for your body to just go, oh no, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. And then it becomes a snowball effect, right? So, well, I was way behind that one. I'm going to have to really think hard and concentrate on getting this next one right. And now you're overthinking it. And it's this constant. I feel bad for the kid. The good news for you is I guess yours might be back this weekend or next.
Yeah, I definitely want your take on that because I think he is starting against TCU when we get there for sure.
Yeah. But I mean, I think he accounted himself well. And, in every kind of, I hate to say this as an Aggie fan, but every kind of playoff run, you have a couple of games that you just kind of squeak by and you survive and advance. And that's what you guys did this week. And the fact that you did it with your backup quarterback says a lot about the program that Sark's put in place. Unfortunately, personally. But no, I think he's a young guy that he was playing in a very unstructured high school program. I don't know Sark's philosophy on how prepared he gets his backup quarterbacks. To be very honest with you, I don't know how many reps they get. Yeah. Certainly probably don't get many reps during the week with the first team. And I'm certain that there was a certain amount of nerves too, just playing in front of that sort of crowd where it's not you're coming in because somebody just got hurt and you're on the road and you've got a lot of adrenaline and you don't have to think too much. You're just trying to survive. I think sometimes when you have too much time to think in that quarterback position and not just react and read and rely on your talent and, the situation, the training that you've been given, you're going to see things like wild swings with the talent's there. The execution was not.
Yeah. And there
Um,
was definitely, like, to your point, a lot of head hanging after every incompletion. So you definitely
yeah,
got the feeling he wasn't just letting it rip. He was in his head a lot of that.
yeah, and that's the pressure of imagine being Malik Murphy. You're in your second year on campus.
Yep.
You're in the middle of a playoff run, and the field is wide open for you guys to march in. A couple teams ahead of you have to lose, but that's going to happen schedule wise. Some of the teams ahead of you are going to have to lose, so you're right there to get one of those top four spots in the country. But you're the guy who lost to Kansas State at home. That's a huge amount of nut sack shrinking. And I have a better term for that. Pressure is probably the term I should use, but it's when your testicles crawl back up inside your body. You just want to stay warm and protected.
Yeah. Which, was kind of chilly out here today. So that would have been a good thing. Before I do want to talk about obviously our games next week, but we've seen more of as the Big Ten turns. And funny, of course, Andy, I saw an article about this story where apparently Michigan is now accusing other Big Ten schools of deciphering their signs and then colluding. And one person said, this isn't like what the Astros did. I'm like, you really had to do that in the article, but okay, there you go. Look, how serious do you think this is? I'm already seeing people saying that if Michigan wins a national championship, it needs an asterisk by it. What are your first big thoughts on just the whole situation, but also now this new development of this is not going to be very friendly conference meetings next August before the season starts again?
I mean, at the end of the day, all this is going to do is convince Jim Harbaugh that he needs to go back to the NFL, and I'm sure there's going to be a couple of teams with arms wide open to welcome him.
Maybe
back
one in
into the fold.
Dallas.
It could be, depending on how much Dak can't get across goal lines the rest of the season. He was really close. Yeah,
And he's so nice.
he seems like a really nice guy.
He's a super swell guy.
Yeah.
Loves his mom.
As far as Michigan goes, and you brought up the Astros things because I notice a lot of the national media is trying to equivocate for Michigan. It's cheating. And I think both of us as fans of the Astros, I know this is not a baseball show, but give me a second, have no problem. We don't like it, but we have no problem admitting they cheated. They got caught. Yeah. It is what it is. There's none of us has ever tried to say, well, it didn't happen. Michigan gets a different sort of it's to me what would happen if the Yankees got caught doing what the Astros got caught doing. It wouldn't be, oh my God, it's the crime of the century. It's boys will be boys and they're just trying to get an advantage. And if you're not cheating, you're not trying, and all this stuff they do when they wave it away, it's cheating. It's cheating when your Michigan does it. It's cheating when the Houston Astros do it. It's cheating when when the NBA refs do it. I guess they still do that. I don't know.
Yeah.
Hey, the NFL's never had a ref thrown in jail for trying to fix a game. So
no.
that.
Although Ed Hockley looks like he used to come right out of being in jail because that guy had some yard guns.
Yeah. Neck down, face up. He looks like a guy that's wanted to be a preacher, but didn't quite have the fire. So he runs the choir.
Were you expecting an Ed Hockley reference on today's show? Because
I live for an Ed Hockley reference. His biceps rule my dreams. Michigan is crying because Michigan cries. Jim Harbaugh's crying because Jim Harbaugh cries. And I hope the Big Ten is colluding against them. I hope they've known that Michigan was sending guys to videotape practices for years, using those signs, and all of the other Big Ten schools got together and go, hey, let's do fake practices when that guy's there. The one sitting in the stands wearing Michigan gear. Let's go ahead and just run a whole fake practice and set them up. Hey, guess what? They're doing this. Good. I hope that everybody is trying to give Ohio State the advantage to win, or Penn State, or whoever it is, the flavor of the month. Because ultimately, if you're going to play that game, other people are going to play it too.
But to me, that should be punishment enough. Like I saw, again, because you're right, this is bringing up a lot of the Astro stuff. And somebody pointed out that I can't remember who started for the Dodgers in game 4 of 17. Well, that dude changed all the signs and Scherzer didn't. Not Scherzer, Kershaw didn't. So to me,
the really old guy, Rich Hall.
Yeah. So to me, that should begin and end the conversation.
Rich Hill.
That,
Sorry, Rich Hall was not necessarily the news, which is a comedy reference for those of
Oh,
us in
you
the
know
circle.
what? I thought of you know what word hit my head as I woke up? Sniglet.
Sniglet, Rich
Yeah,
Hall. Yes.
I had sniglets in my head yesterday for some reason. Yeah, so but
If
to
you,
me that should be the end, the beginning and the end of the punishment is on the field.
yeah, and that's where it probably should end. Nothing ultimately is going to happen to Michigan. The NCAA is going to drag their feet, and Harbaugh is going to go on to the NFL. And at some point, the NCAA is going to come back and take away some wins from this season, and nobody's going to care. Do you
Yeah,
think LSU is really, really mad that somebody came back? Well, the record says you didn't win those games. Yeah, but we sold national championship merch. So,
yeah, yeah. I mean, we could talk about Reggie not having the Heisman, but Reggie has the Heisman. Like,
exactly.
yeah.
So it's much ado about nothing. And I guess it's good in a way that college football, this is the level of scandal you have in college football these days. Dion runs his mouth, and Michigan got accused of cheating, and they probably did, and they got mad that other people found out. That it's not like the NFL where people are beating, have a history of beating their wives,
Mm-hmm.
or Major League Baseball where people have a history of beating their wives, uh, or the NBA where people have a history of beating their wives.
Or
Maybe there
college
is something.
basketball where people cutting each other's heads off.
Yeah, I mean, that's just at Baylor.
No,
That's not all at college. That's not
that's
all
true.
college.
So you saying it doesn't happen everywhere? Okay. All right.
No, that there's a lot of things I would say. Yeah, it probably happens at every school. Cutting off a player's head and trying to make him look like a drug dealer to cover your own ass has never happened at another school. That is pure Baylor. Good
Well,
job, Baylor.
good job, Baylor. Turning to this week, we'll take a look at your game first. Mississippi State, Texas A&M. You guys are 17-point favorites. But this season
Aha!
could look a lot different because then you have a very winnable game week after. I mean, it does look like you could be on a 2-0 roll going into your LSU game.
But there's an aha. Depending on who you believe on the internet, our starting quarterback, which is our backup quarterback, Max Johnson, has either bruised or broken ribs. And of course,
Oh no.
the people who hate Jimbo have decided that he has broken ribs and they're going to play him anyway and risk his life. That's a narrative that is happening. Um, and they'll caveat, well, if true, you believe it's true, you would have made that statement.
Sure.
But let's say he had bruised ribs. It's going to take him a couple of good hits. And Mississippi State is a bad football team, but they can get after the quarterback, and we can't protect the quarterback. So that's probably a bad matchup. So then you're looking at your third string quarterback. And if you are like me, you had to look up who that was this morning because his name's Jalen Henderson. And 3 years ago, he started some games for Fresno State and hasn't played since. So,
Remember they used to
that,
be good. Remember back in the day, Fresno State had that run.
yeah, I
Yeah.
would say if you're going to subject yourself to the Mississippi State Texas A&M game, bet the under. And if you can still get 17 points for Mississippi State, you should absolutely take it. I don't know what to expect. I know I've said that every week. We should win. We have not lost against really bad teams yet this year. Everybody that we've lost to is a ranked team, or at least was at some point. I think Miami is out now, but Alabama, Tennessee, and Ole Miss are all in the top 15 of college football. So they're not shameful losses necessarily from a record standpoint. But if we're down to our third string quarterback, and I don't know how well he knows an offense that even our really the guys who get all the reps don't really understand the offense because Jimbo has made it entirely too complicated to run that offense. I hope we can run the ball.
Yeah.
Having said that, Mississippi State is in shambles, and it's for a sad reason because they lost their head coach and they're playing a guy that it shouldn't be a head. They're coached by a guy that shouldn't be a head coach yet, and he's doing the best he can. But that program's just in an area of disarray. They beat Arkansas 7-3, so that's the level of offense they can put up
Wow.
this year. Um,
Arkansas
But
had
yeah,
bullpen
you're right
problems,
from a
huh?
record standpoint. Realistically, without me being fatalistic, if we win this week, which I think we probably will, but I reserve the right to be super angry if we don't.
Yeah.
Then
Yeah.
we play Abilene Christian, and the annual SEC gives you a November break game that's not really a bye, but you got to show up. But hey, let those guys that redshirting anyway get some reps, that kind of game. And then you go to LSU, and that's the question that we asked at the beginning of the season, what happens when you're 7-5? There's a lot of angry Aggies, and the fan base is really, really disillusioned. And you can talk all you want about injuries and about how we're one possession away every week, but we're one possession away every week. At some point, it's not bad luck. At some point, it's a trend.
I think especially being one possession away every week speaks to coaching. It's one thing if
Yeah.
you're getting out talented and you lose by 2 touchdowns. Like there's
There's
moments where Jimbo could have affected the change of the game.
Well, that's the thing for me. I realized that the talent was younger last year, but he is 10-11 with rosters that have been in the top 8 of talent across college football for these last 2 years.
Yeah.
So it's not a talent issue. It's a coaching issue. And if Jimbo can't get out of it's not even a defensive coaching issue at this point because Durkin has fixed the defense. Yeah, they give up too many long passes, but a lot of teams do in college football.
And that's getting overshadowed, Andy, because the defense was so not great last year, and he really has turned it around.
Yep.
But you can't discuss that when your team already has 5 losses. Like you can't.
No, it's there are some good things happening in the program that are getting overshadowed, but they're getting overshadowed by things that you can't ignore anymore.
Yeah.
You can't ignore Jimbo can't seem to get his teams to win on the road. You can't ignore the fact that he loses one possession games all the time and has for a number of years. You can't ignore that his system is designed for the quarterback to take maximum punishment. Witnessed by the fact that we're on our 3rd string quarterback for the 2nd year in a row because they can't stay upright. And it's not because the offensive line isn't talented, it's because they're not coached well. And if you're not coached well and you're murdering a guy, and I'm Connor Wegman next year, I don't have any insider information to Connor Wegman or Max Johnson or anybody for that matter, but I've got to sit there and think I could stay here and risk an injury that's worse than what I've experienced this year that might be career ending or career threatening because of the wrong hit that could happen.
Yeah.
Or I could go to another program. Maybe it's not as high profile a program, but stay healthy, stay safe, and just start working on my NFL career. And I think there's a lot of guys on the roster, especially offensively, who are going to have to make that decision this year, which is another part of why we're just all kind of A&M fans aren't even mad right now. We're just sad. It's sad because there's so much bad things on the horizon, so many bad things on the horizon. Without being, you can be very realistic and look at it and see there's some really not good days coming really, really soon without a change. And I don't know if that change, I don't think Jimbo's capable of that change at this point.
Well, I think the bright side of it all, though, is for as much as the outlook from 3 years ago changed pretty much overnight, it can change again with the right set of circumstances.
Well, and again, I don't regret the whole Jimbo piece, and I know we spent a lot of time talking about this and not enough time talking about your program, who has fun things to talk about. So we'll do that in a second. But hey, if Jimbo leaves tomorrow, which he's not going to, but if he leaves tomorrow, he has made A&M a place that can go be in the conversation from a recruiting standpoint to pull in a top 5 class every year, which is where you have to be. He has gotten the alumni and donors moving in the right direction as far as facilities, which again, we have arguably the best facilities in the country. And I know a lot of your fans who have not been to College Station in over a decade will be very shocked next fall when they go there and they see the changes that have happened to College Station since the last A&M Texas game. And that stuff matters to kids.
Sure.
Our NIL program's competitive. And I would say that it's, if not top 5, certainly top 10 in the country. So he's put a lot of the things in place that whoever's next is going to use to be successful. So from that standpoint, I think that's the other thing. By the time Francione was done, everybody hated him. By the time Sherman was done, nobody really wanted Sherman coaching your football team anyway. By the time Sumlin was done, we were all done with him because he had just clearly quit. He started the whole quiet quitting thing, just did it before the pandemic. But to a man, I don't know anybody who hates Jimbo or thinks Jimbo's a bad guy I think Jimbo loves the school and he gets it, but he's just not successful. And at some point, you've got to figure out what the opportunity cost is for keeping him versus what the cost is for
Yeah.
cutting bait. And that's the dilemma that is way above my pay grade that I hope somebody comes to a decision on fairly soon so we know how to move forward.
It's
And I
hard
know
to
how
hate a guy named Jimbo ever.
I
He's
I
the
think
fun
he's a
uncle.
very I think he's a very genuine guy. I think he is I think he's fun to talk to. I just don't think he's a good coach anymore. I think
Yeah.
the game I think it's literally a situation where the game has passed him by. Which is unfortunate. But
Before we
you
jump to Texas TCU, though, it does look like there's another big story out of the Big Ten that there's actually real thought that Harbaugh might be suspended before the Penn State game this weekend.
Okay.
I mean, to me, like people are making a big deal out of it, but look, your game plan's in place. Who cares?
Yeah, I'm not.
He'll
I
coach via cell phone from his hotel.
exactly. Well, Dusty got thrown out of Game 5 of the ALCS. Where did he go? Right in the dugout door.
Yeah, right. But okay, so yeah, Texas TCU, Quinn Ewers is coming back. You seem to, I think, when we were talking about it, you feel like are they rushing him back? Is it too early? What are your thoughts on it?
I mean, I don't know the extent of his injury for certain, and clearly they think he could be back. I think it's a little bit reactionary because of what TCU has done against Texas the last several years. Uh, TCU is a program that, right, wrong, or indifferent, and I know a lot of people make fun of the Super Bowl stuff, but TCU does get up for the Texas game. And the last year they were a very good team, but there's been a couple of years prior to that where they're not really a good team, but they seem to have Texas's number. And they, roll out a quarterback nobody's ever heard of, and all of a sudden they're, up by 2 touchdowns, and Texas has looked kind of mystified a little bit. I think there's some fear that that could happen again. I think there is the acknowledgement that this is, very much going to be a playoff run. Some things, like we said, have to kind of fall your way for other teams, but certainly there's no reason that you guys aren't going to be in the Big 12 championship game, and you don't need that hiccup. And so I think Quinn Ewers is kind of hiccup insurance. And I guess it can work unless he gets hurt again or unless he aggravates that AC sprain again. So I think it's rushing him. I don't think you need him to beat TCU.
Yeah, I don't either.
And it's one of the things that would drive me wild about Sark if he was my head coach. He seems to forget that he can run the ball on just about anybody that he plays. And he'll remember it randomly for a quarter, and then he'll forget again because
Andy, in the game last week, they had 2nd and 5 inside the 20, and then threw 2 straight passes and kicked the field goal.
But it's just it would be maddening for me if I was a Texas fan. And that's not even me being critical of Sark as a head coach. It's just really weird the way he decides, well, now we're going to try to pass the ball every single down for a while. And it's not, this year I kind of get it because maybe the running backs aren't quite as good as they were last year, but he did the same thing with Bijan Robinson and Roschon Johnson in the backfield last year. And that's where I felt the turn happened with your season towards the end of the year where, I can just run the ball. Oh, cool. We'll just do that. And that's okay. Run the ball. You still win games. You shorten games when you can run the ball. You pick up tough yards when you can run the ball. You open up your passing game when you can run the ball. So it's just you don't need Quinn Ewers to run the ball or to win the game this week, but I think you need Quinn Ewers to have an effective passing game. And that's got to be where Sark's coming from and what the thought process is that we need to work on our passing game, and we're going to do it against TCU.
I would suspect that you will still, to protect Quinn Ewers, you still will see a little heavier reliance on the run this year, this game. And I wonder almost if Sark knows that, and he knows if it's Malik back there, then TCU knows that too. And now at least you have to respect the run. One of the things that was really frustrating for me in the K-State game was how little the defense reacted to the fact that K-State's now going to throw the ball. And they hadn't thrown the ball all year. And it just seemed really frustrating to me that they just kept expecting K-State to roll out there with that running offense that, frankly, Texas had dismantled and destroyed in that first half, and just we're not prepared for K-State to throw the ball.
Yeah, it's interesting. I know offensive coaches come out of games with scripts, and this is what we're going to do for the first 10 plays, and then we'll see how things adjust. It feels like the Texas Pete Katowski. I should do that better since he's one of my countrymen.
That's right. One of our people.
It feels like we've scouted this team. This is what they're going to do. So this is how we're going to defend. And if they change anything, well, shit, but we're going to defend that still because they're going to go back to that. Yeah, it's interesting. And I think, if there's something that's going to bite you in a game against TCU, it will be kind of the stubbornness of we're not going to run the ball. We're going to pass the ball because we need to pass the ball. And that's we like passing the ball better than we like running the ball. And defensively is we're going to defend the run. And, if they pass, great, but we're not going to stop trying to defend the run because that's how and it's just that next step for your coaching staff is going to need to be, we need to adjust to what this team is doing and start imposing our will and making them do what we want them to do rather than just defending one part of the game and hoping the rest of it works out. And that's what it felt like in a couple of games I've seen. That's what it looked like against Houston too.
Yeah.
When they came back, just they're throwing downfield now. We didn't plan for that.
Yeah, then that's what it felt to me too. And Texas is a 12-point favorite over TCU. So
as you should be. TCU is not a great team this year.
They're not, and we knew that as the show ended last year, right? We knew that TCU pushed all their chips in, and what was a really magical season for them. So I still think it's weird that the first Texas team to go to the playoff was not the Aggies and not the Longhorns, but was in fact the Horned Frogs.
Well, at least it wasn't Baylor.
At least, you know what? That should be the motto of the show. At least it's not Baylor. All right. So Andy, I guess prediction for the Aggies this weekend.
We'll win by one possession. It will win, but we'll make it look so much harder than it has to be. And if Max Johnson isn't playing, I expect a lot of run game and a lot of weird option type plays that we've never tried to run before, because I don't know if this guy can throw a ball. To be real honest with you, nobody knows.
Yeah, I think A&M will cover. I think A&M by 17 this weekend. What about Texas TCU?
I think Texas wins by two possessions easily, so 10 to 14 points. TCU is not a good team. TCU is the reason people think Deion Sanders is a good head coach right now. If that tells you anything.
It does. All right. So, yeah, I have Texas by 2 touchdowns. So hopefully we'll have a more fun episode. This has been Lone Star Yell Fight. Before we get out of here, I'm James Christopher. That's Andy Tom Chesson. Want to do a thank you for your service to all of my brothers and sisters in uniform. You'll notice I've got my 13 Fox Army Vet t-shirt on. But I also want to do a shout out to all of the wives and families. We kind of forget all the sacrifice they make. So enjoy your Veterans Day. Vets, don't feel bad about getting that free burger from Chili's.